And once we've done the decreased round and we have verified that the stitch count matches that in the pattern, we are to place a locking marker here to mark the top of the sleeve, the center. Note that it will not be the same place as the shoulder seam because this is a European shoulder construction, so the shoulder is slightly backwards. So the center or the top of the sleeve cap, the middle of the sleeve cap, is actually part of the front, so to speak. But it should be equal distance of stitches away from the underarm, the beginning of round marker there. For our first short row, we are lucky that we are on the knit row of the garter stitch. So we get to knit all the way to this marker here, which we no longer need and can remove now. And then we need to knit all the way up to the locking marker that we just placed. Here we are at the top of the sleeve cap. So we'll slip this marker for now. And the first short row, the first time we turn, will be 8 stitches away from that center. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you can use whichever short row method you prefer. I will demo this with the Japanese short row. And for Japanese short row, we need to trap the yarn at every turn. And as this is a garter, I will slip the first stitch and knit backwards to create the purl ridge on the right side. When we get to the middle marker here, we can remove it because now we have already established. So we'll need to knit 8 more stitches. And we are the equal distance away from the center where we turn again. And that's our first short rows. Now we will move for a little while. We'll be moving 1 stitch with every row that we work. We'll be moving 1 stitch closer to the beginning of round. So at the same time, we'll also be concealing that gap that would otherwise appear if we didn't do it. And I'll show what that means when I get to the previous turn. Here I am at the previous turning point, and I need to move 1 more stitch before I turn and work back again. And this is where I use my Japanese short row trick of pulling that trap yarn, placing it on the needle, and knitting it together with the next stitch. That is also that stitch that we need to move 1 step further. And as soon as we've done this knit 2 together, we trap yarn and turn to work back again. And that is the section A in a nutshell. We knit all the way to the previous turn. And as we are now on the wrong side, we'll pick up, but instead of knitting it together, we want this stitch on the shorter side to lean over it. So we'll be doing an S, S, K. So slip knitwise, and knit both of them together through the back loop. That way we get that stitch lean over that loop. And again, just moving 1 stitch past the turn, turning to work backwards. And we'll be repeating this back and forth. I don't want to lose that. And we'll be repeating this back and forth for a specified number of times that's indicated in the pattern, and it will create the cap like so. And when we get to about, well, it depends on what size you're working, to about here for my size, we'll be looking at how we work section B of the sleeve cap. And once you've completed the section A, we can move on to section B, which is essentially the same type of back and forth short row that we've done till now, except here before we get to the turning point, we need to do a decrease as the armhole circumference is larger than the upper arm circumference. We need to lose some of these stitches somehow, and it's done along the remaining stitches to the underarm. So we'll knit to 3 stitches before the turn, and we'll knit 2 together on the right side. So that means we decrease a stitch. Then we'll knit that last stitch before the turn and carry on with our short row, concealing that gap. Knit 2 together and turn again, as we just need to move 1 stitch past the previous turn. The same on the wrong side, so we get to 3 stitches before the turn, and we will do a slip slip knit decrease to be symmetrical. So slip 1 knitwise, slip 1 knitwise, knit both of them through the back loop, knit that last stitch again, and repeat the same slip slip knit to conceal the short row gap here. So I'll make a turn and repeat these for a specified number of times until you reach the beginning of the underarm. So we shouldn't be working any short rows along the stitches that were picked up along the underarm cast on. So by the time you get to here, you should be done with the short rows. The pattern will tell you how many times to repeat those, and then once we've done with section B, we'll be returning to work in the round and down to the cuff. After finishing section B of the cap, we are in section C, in which we return to work in the round. And in the last short row, we closed the gap that we created by turning on the right side, and that was the same as we do usually, except we didn't turn, we just continued working to the beginning of round marker. And then on the next round, which coincides with a purl round, apart from the first stitch here, we are faced with the last turn that we need to close approaching from the other side than usually. So the actions we take will be slightly different here, in that we need to purl to 1 stitch before the turn, and we will be closing this gap by performing in theory a slip slip purl, because we need to produce a purl stitch. So I'm going to slip the first stitch knitwise, and then I will insert my needle into the loop and place them both on the left needle like so. This, by the way, this is just for people who do Japanese short rows. If you're using another short row method, you can disregard this instruction entirely. And I am supposed to do a purl through the back loop. That can be very tricky because that stitch is very tight, that loop is very tight. So if you're not able to do a purl through the back loop like I just did here, feel free to just purl them together, like purl 2 together. The impact will be minimal. And then we proceed with purling the rest of the round all the way around, and we are back to working in the round for any typical sleeve instruction.